How's it going, everybody in Giants Nation? Welcome back to the channel. It is Wednesday. It is one day prior to our final preseason game against the New England Patriots up in Foxborough. I'm going to break down the top 5 things that I'm looking forward to in that game. So now this is going to be a little different than the other top 5 videos I've done, as I'm going to look at some of the storylines I'm looking into and also breaking down some of the bubble guys, some of the guys right on the fringe of making the roster and not making the roster as well, both on offense and defense. So that is what I'm going to go over today. I hope you enjoyed the video. Leave a like if you did, subscribe if you haven't already, and now let's get into the top 5. Number 5, will we finally see Sam Beal? Now, over the past 2 weeks, I've kind of had a field day with this entire Sam Beal situation. I'm practicing. Now I'm not practicing. It's been a very frustrating situation. As I reported in my news video earlier this week, for the first time, Sam Beal was participating in practice. He was doing individual drills with his teammates, but as soon as that tweet from Matt Lombardo goes out, he sent out a second tweet. Beal's on the sideline once again with trainers. I feel like I'm beating a dead horse at this point. But now just yesterday, what was described as a half-speed, glorified walkthrough kind of practice for the Giants, Beal wasn't healthy enough to participate in that either. He was seen working out his hamstring with trainers once again. And what's most frustrating is things that he is now coming out and saying. So now, Beal told reporters that he had no intention of starting off this season on IR, and he fully intends on making the 53-man roster. He went on to tell reporters that it's tough for him to choose just one attribute that is his strongest, because he simply has so many. Well, I'm just giddy with anticipation, Beal, to see what these attributes are. Clearly, one of them is not rehab and rehabilitation and getting yourself healthy. Now, with all the backlash coming out about fans criticizing players for not going out and playing, through pain when they're injured, things of that nature, basically suffering for our entertainment, I'm going to put this very clear and very concise in regards to Sam Beal. If you're legitimately hurt, you're legitimately in pain, and you physically cannot get yourself up to play, that is completely understandable. But in any other line of work, if you miss the amount of time that Sam Beal has missed, you would be fired. You would no longer be working. He consistently is missing time, and I get injuries happen, but it gets to a point where enough is enough. It's clear that the Giants see something in him, his, I'd say play on the field, but we haven't seen that. So there is an intangible about him that the Giants like. All I know, if I'm a guy that's on the fringe, like the ones we're going to talk about later, but a guy like Jake Carlock, who might not be making the team, but a guy that hasn't even participated in a practice snap potentially takes a spot from you, that's got to be very frustrating, especially when you're busting your ass every single day. Every time you get an opportunity, you're going as hard as you possibly can. Quite frankly, I'd be pissed. But I truly believe if he does not play in this ball game, Sam Beal is either going to be cut or placed on IR once again. Either way, I hope this is the last time I have to get into anything regarding Sam Beal in a negative fashion. Number 4, quarterbacks. So I put quarterbacks because this is, once again, a very interesting group this week. First of all, we did hear earlier this week that Eli Manning will be sitting out this final game to focus solely on Dallas in week 1. So that means Daniel Jones will be making his first career start. So now, I understand this is not a regular season start, it is just preseason, but I'm excited to see how things go in the game. As I mentioned in my news video, the preparation for a starter is much different than a backup. Throughout the week, you're constantly running with first team. There's a lot more studying going on in the playbook because you're the first one out there. It was clear this week that the coaching staff wanted Daniel to take this opportunity very seriously, treating it as if it was week one in preparation. So he's proved, he's more than capable. He's checked every box this preseason. He's mentally, physically, emotionally tough. He can block out distractions. And quite honestly, is he ready to start? No. But this is going to be one hell of a grooming period to see how he handles that whole week of preparation. And lastly, in regards to the quarterbacks, and I have mentioned this in the past, is who will be that third string guy. So now, last week, quite honestly, neither of them really, between Tanny and Laletta, none of them really took those reins. None of them showed why they are so much better and more suited than the other. In the past, I kind of have given my insight on this, and a guy like Tanny, who's been everywhere, has a lot more of experience, might have more to offer to the current Giants situation than Kyle Laletta. Whereas, we can have Eli and Tanny mentoring the one kid rather than, Eli having to focus on two different guys in terms of teaching Laletta and teaching Tanny. But I've kind of beaten that as well. I've gone over that several times. I'm just hoping someone sticks out in this ball game, shows why it should be them over the other, and finally put this question to rest. Give the coaches something to look at. Number 3, can we maintain the pass rush? In our first 3 preseason games, the Giants have shown the ability to get to the quarterback. In game 1, we recorded 2 sacks, 3 total QB hits. Game 2, 3 sacks and 5 total QB hits. And then in game 3, the Giants racked up 5 sacks and 8 total QB hits. So now the progression and the overall increased production of our pass rush has been really nice to see over the course of the past 3 games. Especially because a lot of the criticism coming into this season was the fact that the Giants have no pass rush, and in a sense, we traded away our best pass rusher in Olivier Vernon. So for me, coming into this game tomorrow night against the Patriots, I really do hope to see a dominant pass rush early and often. Mainly, I'm more concerned about seeing this production out of our defensive line. The majority of our pass rush that we have seen so far has been from our outside linebackers, guys like Marcus Golden, Josiah Tawaefa, and the X-Man, who has come up with 3 sacks in these first 3 preseason games. I'm fully aware the last game of preseason, game 4 is mostly for those bubble guys fighting tooth and nail that last chance for that final roster spot. But if we see any time whatsoever from Tomlinson, Hill, Lawrence, I'd love to see those guys get in the face of whoever is at quarterback. Number 2, bubble guys. Defense. At this point in preseason, if you followed the games, checked out the box score, or read any of the headlines coming out of camp, you probably have a pretty firm grasp on the core group of guys that are going to make the 53-man roster. But right now, I want to talk about some of the guys to watch in this ball game against the Patriots that are on that fringe, as I just said, on that bubble, who could potentially make the team, and a few guys who could potentially lose their spot in this game. I could make a completely separate video breaking down every single player that could potentially earn a spot or could lose their spot, but in the case of this video, I'm just breaking down a few guys to watch and a few that I believe have a chance to earn that spot. So now, I'd like to start off with our interior linebacking group. First of all, who would have thought when the Giants drafted Ryan Connolly in the 5th round, 143 overall, that we'd be looking at a legitimate case for him to be a starting middle linebacker when the season begins. And he's not the only one. A guy like Tay Davis, although he did struggle against the Bengals, has looked very good in the eyes of the coaches, getting a lot of reps with the first team in practice. He continues to run first team alongside Connolly at times and Ogletree when Ogletree has been healthy. For me in this game, look no further than BJ Goodson, who quite honestly has slowly moved further and further down the depth chart as the weeks have gone on. Now personally, as I've stated in multiple videos, one of my bold predictions was that he's going to flat out be cut this season after being such a prominent player last season for us on defense. In addition to Goodson, make sure to keep an eye out for Nate Stupar and Josiah Toefa. All three of these guys are kind of up in limbo at this point as far as who is going to potentially be that fourth man on that interior group. I believe Ogletree, Connolly, and Tay Davis are pretty much a lock at this point. The one with the most to lose is clearly BJ Goodson. As I mentioned, he was a pretty prominent part of our defense last season, and he's kind of just watched the talent around him get better and better, and he's slowly falling out of favor with coaches, running the third team defense against the Jets, for instance. He does have to show something in this game to show that he is worth a roster spot, or he's going to be saying goodbye to Big Blue. And clearly the most to gain is Josiah, an undrafted free agent. He's taken advantage of his opportunities, although most of them have been in pass coverage during games, but has shown that he does have run stopping and pass rush abilities. In his opportunities, he's accumulated 13 tackles, he's gotten 1 sack, and actually has 2 pass breakups in those 3 preseason games. So I'm definitely going to be trying to watch and see what opportunities he gets in this game to potentially sway the opinion of coaches in his favor. Now, the last guy I want to talk about was someone who I had very high hopes for early in camp. He got some much-deserved attention early in the summer, and in the first preseason game against the Jets, pretty much was one of the ones that everyone was talking about. Of course, I'm speaking about the local kid, Jake Carlock. But as time has gone on, it's clear his inability to shed blocks has limited his playing sense. He had that breakout performance against the Jets, and for the most part, we have not seen him since then. But he has shown, as I said, some playmaking ability, and it's without question he's a hustler on the field, and coaches love that. So I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on him, seeing if he gets any opportunities in this final game to make a case for himself. Perhaps maybe not on the Giants, but maybe somewhere else there is a roster spot for him. And number 1, Bubble Guys, offense. As I stated in that last entry, there are a bunch of guys that pretty much have their spot locked up on this roster, and there are dozens of guys fighting for a potential roster spot. But I'm just going to be focusing on a few guys that I'm going to be looking out for versus the Pats. So now first, I'm going to start with the very glamorous position of offensive line. Now, essentially the front 5 of the Giants has been locked up since early spring, pretty much since guys like Remmers and Zeitler joined the team. But there are several guys that are going to be fighting for the chance to back these guys up. One of them being Chad Slade. Slade has improved greatly over the course of camp. He has the ability to play both guard and tackle, which is big in the eyes of coaches, seeing as how if someone goes down, there's not much of a worry as to who you can slide in when you have a guy that can play both positions. And secondly, on the offensive line, very quickly, I am a big fan of Big George Asafo-Edgy, but with him being a 7th round pick and receiving that concussion recently, odds are he might not be making the team here, but there is an option for him to join the practice squad, which would be great to keep him in the building with the Giants training staff. Now, onto a guy who I believe has a genuine chance of making this roster, CJ Conrad. Now, Conrad is a rookie tight end out of Kentucky, and I believe is one of the hardest working men in that group for the Giants. With the very poor play and the drops by Scott Simonson, I believe that 3rd tight end spot is kind of wide open at this point. Personally, I believe this is between Garrett Dickerson and CJ Conrad. Now, Dickerson had an impressive game against the Bengals. He had 2 catches for 30 yards, and Conrad only actually was on the field for 8 snaps in that ball game. Could have been by design. Maybe the coaches have already seen enough out of the young tight end to give him a roster spot, But I believe overall in this game, what you're going to want to focus on is when Dickerson and Conrad are on the field and who outperforms who, because it could come down to who gets that third tight end spot. Lastly, my favorite, wide receivers. Now, if I don't mention someone's name like Cody Latimer, Russell Shepard, or a guy like Darius Slayton, it's not because I don't think they're going to make the roster. I think their position is pretty much locked up. It also doesn't mean that I'm not excited to see them or I don't think they're going to have a good season. I'm just more so focusing on the guys that are on that hump between making and not making the team. Wide receiver is, without question, the hardest position to cut down. You bring in a ton of talented guys, and you essentially have to cut that down to, in most cases, half of what you brought in. So it's very difficult to cut it down and sift through the different talents. Of course, with the recent injury to Alex Wesley, who went down on a non-contact route running drill, it's tough, but it does, in a sense, make the decision a bit easier. One guy that I really want to watch in this ball game will be Britton Golden. Now, Britton Golden proved he had playmaking abilities in the game against the Bengals. I don't care if it's nothing but fifth stringers out in the field. Anytime you return a kickoff or a punt return all the way to the house for a touchdown, that's extremely impressive. I'm very excited to see what he might be able to do in this game. Will he make the team as a wide receiver? Perhaps not, but there is always room for a return specialist on a football team, and if he can put out another decent performance in that realm of the ball game, he could very well be making his 53-man roster. And of course, Reggie White Jr. So now, with Reggie White Jr., this is a guy I really hope puts everything he has on full display in this final game. If you watched my preseason game number 1 review, Jets versus Giants, you know how high I am on him. And it's not just from that game, it's his route running abilities in practice as well. For him, it's consistency from what it looks like. He had a very good game, a breakout performance against the Jets, and we really haven't heard anything from him since. Before he ended up catching a 36-yard pass from the Bengals, he was pretty much dormant in those games. So I will 100% be looking for him to put on a great performance. Obviously, there are many, many more on the offensive side of the ball who are going to be fighting for their roster spot. These are just a few guys that I'm going to be keeping an extra eye out for because of what I have seen through camp. But at the end of the day, I hope everyone puts on a great performance against the Patriots and can somehow achieve their NFL 53-man roster dreams. And that's all I got for you so far today, guys. Of course, as always, if anything comes out throughout the day that is worth reporting to you, I will make sure to keep you up to date. Later on tonight, I will be posting another episode of Madden 20 New York Giants franchise, so keep an eye out for that. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, and if you haven't already, sub to the channel. Until then, good luck to the Giants. I can't wait for tomorrow night's game against the Patriots, and I'll see you in the next one, guys.